The black was never truly silent. Even in the void of space, where no air carried sound, the hum of sensors, the nervous breaths of crewmen, and the soft crackle of comlinks filled the Imperial warship Veilbreaker. Positioned at the edge of Sector 91C, the fleet was meant to be a show of strength. 5 destroyers, 2 dreadnoughts, and the carrier Honor Flame. The human colonies had expanded too far, too fast, and now they were being reminded of their place. But something was off. "Sir," Lieutenant Vey called, her voice tight and uncertain. "We've got movement. Deep space, no drive signature." High Commander Thaler leaned forward. "What kind of movement?" She hesitated. I don't know. It's gliding, fast. No propulsion detected, but it's covering distance. Like it's drifting on purpose." A murmur passed through the bridge crew. Ships didn't just drift with intention, not in a straight line, not toward an Imperial fleet. Thaler turned to the holo display. A small dark blip moved across the star map, untagged, unclassified. No identifiers, no heat signature, no ID beacon. It was almost invisible if not for the light it occasionally blocked out. "Put it on visuals," he said. A few clicks later, the central screen lit up, and a cold hush settled over the room. It wasn't a ship. Not by any design they recognized. It didn't gleam with hull plating or bristle with weapon ports. It looked more like a shadow, or the memory of a ship, like something that should have rotted away eons ago. Its surface pulsed faintly, like skin over metal. No lights, no markings, just motion. Steady, silent, wrong. "Bring the Honor Flame's cannons online," Thaler ordered. "Sir," Vey said again, her voice now quieter. "The Veritas and Grave Barge, they've gone dark." He snapped his head toward her. "What?" "No communications. No energy signatures. They're just off the grid, same time that thing passed near them." The blip on the screen edged closer. Still drifting, still quiet. But behind it, 2 ships, each capable of vaporizing a moon, were dead. Thaler didn't waste time. "Sound full alert. All hands ready. Weapons hot. Defensive grid active. I want that thing marked now." But they couldn't mark it. Their systems wouldn't lock on. It was as if the ship was made of something outside sensor comprehension. Even their tracking drones spun wildly the closer they got, their feeds full of static. And then it stopped. The ghost ship, or whatever it was, halted mid-space. No inertia, just stillness, directly between the fleet and the human-settled planet of Artaxis below. Every commander on the bridge stared. Then the lights flickered. Once. Twice. The ship's systems stuttered. Gravity shifted for a breath. Something passed through them, an energy, a frequency, something that didn't belong in this reality. And then came the whisper. Not through comms, not through speakers, through their minds. "Leave." Thaler's mouth opened, but no words came. "Sir." Vey's face was pale. "Orders?" He stared at the ship. The thing didn't fire, didn't threaten. It just was. And yet every instinct Thaler had, every bone forged by years of military rule, every scar, every victory, told him the same thing. This was not something to fight. He'd seen worlds burn, led sieges that cracked continents, but never, never had an entire dreadnought died silently. He pressed the fleet-wide communication. "All units, fall back. Immediate retreat. Do not engage." Murmurs of disbelief crackled through the command channels, but no one disobeyed. One by one, the mighty Empire ships turned, leaving the shadow behind them. The Honor Flame hesitated. Its captain, a bold woman named Siral, refused to abandon position. Thaler could only watch from the rear visuals as the ghostly shape began to drift again, straight toward her. he sent one last message. "Saral, for the love of the gods, run." There was no reply. Only static, then silence. And just like that, the honor flame vanished from all sensors. The retreat was chaos, not because the Imperial ships lacked discipline, but because they had no protocol for this. There were no entries in the archives about ghost ships that unmade capital-class vessels without firing a shot. No war manuals could explain what just happened to the honor flame. The fleet's silent formation shattered into disarray. Dreadnoughts flanked the edges to shield the retreat, even though no one dared engage the entity. As they pulled out of Sector 91C, Thalor sat in his command chair, fists clenched around the armrests, eyes fixed on the holoscreen showing Artaxis shrinking in the distance. He had never lost a ship under his command. Not like this. Vey broke the silence. "It's not pursuing." He didn't answer. "It's just hovering where the honor flame vanished." Still, nothing from Thalor. Then came the call, encrypted, local frequency, from the planet below. "Unidentified Imperial vessel. This is Captain Rhys Aiden, Human Colonial Defense, Artaxis Outpost 4. You left something behind." The crew flinched. A human calling an Empire flagship unidentified wasn't just bold, it was suicidal. Thalor keyed the comm. "This is High Commander Thalor of the Empire's 12th Fleet. Your outpost is under the protection of the Imperial banner. Stand down and explain your signal." The reply was dry, almost amused. "You mean, was under your protection? Seems like your fleet ran the moment our little friend arrived." Thalor grit his teeth. "You're sitting on a Class F settlement. I suggest you remember who governs this system." But Rhys didn't back down. "Right. The same Empire that got their flagship eaten by a ghost. Tell me, Commander, did you even try to communicate with it?" A silence followed. Vey turned toward Thalor slowly. It hadn't even occurred to them. "No," Thalor finally admitted. "We don't negotiate with anomalies." Rhys laughed, bitter and short. "And you wonder why your Empire keeps losing ground? That's not an anomaly. That's her." Vey leaned closer, whispering. "Sir, did he say her?" "I heard it," Thalor replied. He tapped the comm again. "Who is she, Captain?" Rhys's voice dropped low. "We don't know what she is. We just call her the Wraith. She appeared 6 months ago. First at the edge of Orion's dust line, took out a mining fleet. Then she was spotted over Myra 5, hovering over a rebel outpost. Everyone went silent. Not dead, not destroyed, just gone. No wreckage, no screams, no communications, just absence." Vey's face paled. "Sir, this lines up. We had similar disappearances reported in Imperial sectors. We dismissed them as pirate attacks or freak malfunctions." "They weren't," Thalor said grimly. Rhys continued. "Every time she shows up, it's the same. Silent, patient, almost like she's watching, waiting. But there's a pattern." Thalor narrowed his eyes. "What kind of pattern?" "Colonial systems. Human colonies specifically. She only appears when Imperial ships arrive near them." "Then she's a weapon. Some secret tech your people are hiding." "No, Commander. She's not ours. She doesn't protect us either. But if I had to guess..." A pause. "She hates empires." Thalor turned away from the screen, staring at the dark sector now void of the honor flame. The entire time they'd assumed superiority, believed technology and order gave them dominance. But the Wraith didn't care about dominance. She didn't want to fight. She wanted them to leave. "Sir," Vey said, looking down at her console. "She's moving again." "Toward us?" "Number toward the surface." Thalor froze. "Toward Artaxis?" "Yes, direct descent." The holoscreen lit up with flashing alarms. The dark silhouette moved like a smear across the stars, slow and steady, heading toward the largest human city on the planet, Alaron Ridge. Rhys's voice came through again, this time quieter. "She's not here to attack. She's here to judge." Thaler frowned. "Judge what?" "The same thing you're afraid of, us." The wraith descended like a whisper of doom. From the skies above Alaron Ridge, it came, not with the roar of engines or the blare of landing sirens, but with silence so deep it seemed to pull sound from the air itself. People emerged from shelters, balconies and rooftops, their eyes drawn to the sky. Children clutched their parents. Soldiers on the ground stood frozen, fingers on triggers, hearts pounding. Captain Rhys Aiden stood at the outpost's edge, high on the western bluff overlooking the city. He had his sidearm holstered. Not that it would make any difference. He'd seen footage of what happened to the Myra 5 garrison. A full rebel defense grid swallowed in lightless void within seconds. But this wasn't the same. This wasn't destruction. This was presence. A terrible, watching presence. "She's not hostile," his adjutant whispered beside him. "Not yet." "Yeah?" Rhys muttered. "You want to go down there and shake her hand?" The wraith hovered 200 meters above the city. A great, dark mass with no clear beginning or end. From this distance, it resembled a ship, but also something more organic. It pulsed, it breathed, like a massive heart forged from alien alloys and gravity wells. And then it changed. Before their eyes, its skin shimmered. Not lights, not energy, but images. Projections, holograms maybe, if they were that crude. But these felt real. It was the city. Their city. Alaron Ridge. But twisted. Buildings crumbled, fires burned, people ran. Screams, though silent, rippled through the illusion. A war scene that hadn't happened. Yet. It was a warning. "She's showing us what we become," said Rhys quietly. "Or what we cause." His adjutant swallowed hard. "We haven't done any of that." Rhys shook his head. "We haven't, yet. But the Empire's breathing down our necks. One more crackdown, one more rebel flare-up, one more shipment of resource slaves off-world, and this city falls apart." That was the truth. Rhys had done his best to keep the colony stable, but tensions were rising. Imperials wanted full resource control. Locals wanted independence. The Empire offered protection, but it came with mining quotas, off-world conscription, and strict surveillance. The Wraith knew. Somehow, it knew. Meanwhile, in orbit, Thaler watched the same projection on his bridge screen. A live feed was still connected to Rhys's uplink, and what they were seeing left his crew speechless. "She's showing them a future," Vey murmured. "No," Thaler said. "She's showing us what happens if we stay." He could feel it in his bones. This wasn't a battlefield. It was a test, and Thaler's instinct screamed the same thing they had back in Sector 91C. Leave. "She doesn't hate humans," Vey said suddenly. "She hates what happens because of us." That struck him. Hard. For all their might, the Empire had spread itself thin, pressing down on fragile colonies, rewriting local cultures, feeding the central core with labor and ore and obedience. They had justified it as bringing order. But maybe that order bred monsters. "Sir," a junior officer interrupted, voice shaking. "Command Central is asking for a full report. They want to know why we abandoned engagement." Thaler stared at the projection of Alaron Ridge burning. The people. The fear. The future they were being shown if he made the wrong call. "They can wait." Back on the surface, the Wraith's shimmering illusions faded. And then something even stranger happened. The entire underside of the ship opened, not with mechanical hatches or hydraulic arms, but like a pupil dilating. A soft white light poured out, enveloping the center of the city. People panicked, screamed. But there was no heat, no pressure, only stillness. And then the voices came, not loud, not spoken, but felt. Not just to Rhys, not just to Thaylor, to everyone. What you build will decide what I destroy. It echoed through every mind on Artaxis, through every fleet officer, through every child. Then the light collapsed inward, and the wraith began to ascend. Rhys stood in awe. "She's not just watching," he whispered. "She's weighing." The wraith stopped just above the atmosphere, hanging like a judgmental god. Waiting. Thaylor turned to Vey. "We're not just at war with rebels anymore." She looked back at him, her voice barely a breath. "We're at war with our consequences." For hours she hovered, just above the clouds, just below the stars. The wraith neither moved nor spoke again, yet her presence wrapped around the planet like invisible chains. It wasn't fear that held the people in place now. It was uncertainty. That same deep, gut-sick feeling you get when you realize something ancient, something beyond your species' comprehension, has noticed you and is waiting to see what you'll do. In Alaran Ridge, the streets were quiet. People didn't go to work. Markets stayed closed. Children whispered instead of laughing. Everyone was watching the sky. The massive silhouette of the wraith hung over them like a question mark written in shadow. And somewhere in that stillness, in the poorer edge of the city, a young girl named Mara stared up from the rooftop of her family's crumbling apartment block. She was 13, sharp-eyed, too clever for her age, and angry in the way only a child raised on broken promises could be. Her father had been conscripted by the Empire 3 years ago, shipped off to some mining belt beyond Orion, never returned. Her mother worked double shifts to make up for the ration cut they'd faced afterward. Mara understood more about politics and power than most adults. She also understood this. The wraith didn't come for nothing. She came for them. "Do you think it's going to kill us?" her little brother, Tavi, asked. He stood beside her, gripping her sleeve. Mara didn't answer right away. She just stared. "No," she finally said. "I think she wants to see if we'll kill ourselves first." Tavi didn't understand, not really, but he nodded anyway. Back at Outpost 4, Rhys poured another shot of stale whiskey into a dented metal cup. He hadn't slept. His eyes were bloodshot, and his uniform clung to him with the sour dampness of stress. He hadn't stopped replaying the wraith's words since she said them. "What you build will decide what I destroy." What did that even mean? Civilization? Government? Alliances? Or did it mean choices? He slammed the cup down and flicked on the transmitter. "Hi, Commander Thaler? You still in orbit?" The channel crackled for a second. Then the voice came. "I am. And I assume you have something more than another warning." Rhys hesitated. "I have a question." "Then ask it." Rhys took a breath. "Why did you come here in the first place?" A pause. "To remind you of your place." Rhys nodded bitterly. "And do you know it now?" Thaler didn't reply immediately. He stared out his viewport, where the wraith still lingered. "I don't know what she is, but I know this. If we don't pull out of this colony, she'll make sure we leave in pieces." "She already made you leave," Rhys said. "We're just waiting to see if you come back." Another long silence. Then, "You've made your point, Captain." He cut the channel. Moments later, the Imperial fleet began to shift, first in subtle adjustments, then full withdrawal patterns. Not a retreat this time. A relocation, leaving orbit, returning to the jump lanes. Rhys watched it all from his office. "She did it," his adjutant said, almost smiling. "She scared them off." Rhys didn't smile. No, he said. She gave them a choice. They're just smart enough to take it. Back on the rooftop, Mara watched the ships fade into the clouds. Where are they going? Tavi asked. Mara squinted. Away, for now. She looked back up at the Wraith. But not because they care, because something bigger told them to. And then, just as silently as she arrived, the Wraith began to rise. Not fast, not fleeing, but slow, like a judge leaving the courtroom without delivering a verdict. She disappeared past the clouds, vanishing from view, but never truly gone. Because everyone knew she was still out there, watching, waiting. 5 years later, her name was spoken like a myth. The Wraith. Not everyone believed she was real anymore. Some claimed she was a rebel hologram tactic. Others said it was imperial propaganda spun out of control to mask a defeat. But in the outer colonies, in the places where the Empire's grip had once been steel-tight and unshakable, her shadow still lingered. On Artaxis, life had changed. The Empire never returned, not officially. They left under the guise of diplomatic reassessment, but the truth was carved into the memory of every soldier who saw the honor flame disappear. They weren't in control anymore. Something had scared the rulers of half the galaxy into blinking first, and people remembered. But memory fades, especially when no more ships vanish, no more minds are touched, no more warnings are whispered across the stars. And so the tension crept back in. The old arguments resurfaced. This time it came not from the Empire, but from the humans themselves. Mara was 18 now. No longer a curious child on rooftops. She'd grown up hard, shaped by years of watching her people teeter between freedom and chaos. She wore a leather jacket stitched with the white insignia of the Ridge Watch, a civilian patrol force meant to keep order without relying on either Empire or rebel muscle. She had a scar across her cheek from a riot 2 years back, and her fists were calloused from more than just practice. But her eyes hadn't changed, still sharp, still angry, still searching. That evening, she stood at the base of the old city tower, a crowd gathering as shouting echoed from the square. Flags waved, red ones, black ones, fists painted on cloth. The Free Colonies movement had returned, and this time, they weren't talking peace. "We don't need protection," one speaker yelled from the plinth. "Not from the Empire, not from any ghost. We're strong enough to stand on our own." Mara pushed through the crowd. She didn't like the way this was going. These protests were becoming more like rallies, and the lines between self-governance and militancy were blurring fast. She reached the front just as someone threw a bottle. It shattered against the plinth. Gas hissed. Screams followed. She didn't hesitate. Her hand shot to her earpiece. "Unit Delta, dispersal protocol, non-lethal. Get these people back." Gas-masked soldiers rushed in, pushing the crowd out with shields and voice amps, but it was already turning ugly. People weren't just angry. They were ready for a fight. The kind you don't start unless you've already convinced yourself the other side is worse. Later, after the streets had cleared and the wounded were patched up, Mara sat alone in the Ridge Watch command post, watching the night sky from the window. "Where are you?" she whispered. No answer, no flicker of shadow, no hum across the city, just stars, cold and distant. The door behind her creaked open. Reese walked in, older, beard grayer, his military coat now replaced by a civilian council sash. "You handled the riot well." She didn't look at him. "They'll be back tomorrow, louder, angrier." "Probably," he said, sitting beside her. "They think freedom means chaos. Others think it means guns. No one agrees on anything except that they hate whoever's in charge." She looked at him, finally. "And you? What do you think freedom is?" He smiled faintly. "Choice. That's all it ever was. The freedom to choose who we become." She stared out again. And what if we choose wrong? He hesitated. Then she'll come back. They both fell silent at that. A moment later, her earpiece chirped. Mara, you're going to want to see this. We've got an inbound object. No drive signature, no transponder, heading straight for Artaxis. Her blood turned to ice. Reese stood up fast. No, it can't be. But she already knew. It was her. The Wraith was returning, and this time she wasn't silent. The alert spread through Alaron Ridge like fire on dry grass. Inbound object. No drive trail. No heat. No propulsion. It's her. Mara didn't wait for backup. She was already sprinting down the watchtower's main stairwell, 2 steps at a time, her boots thudding on metal grates. The air was heavy with something unspoken, like the entire city had inhaled at once and was afraid to exhale. Every comms line buzzed with chatter, militia units requesting orders, old-timers whispering prayers, and civilians crying out for something, anything, to stop what they felt coming. At street level, people had gathered again. But it wasn't a riot this time. It was awe. Above them, blotting out part of the western sky, the Wraith was descending. No lights, no engines, just motionless drift, that same eerie quiet wrapping around it like a cloak. But this time, it didn't hover above the city. It was heading for Mara, not metaphorically, literally. The ship, if you could call it that, descended lower than ever before, down through the clouds, down past the atmospheric buffer zone, down until its massive form loomed directly over the Watchtower Plaza, casting a shadow that swallowed blocks of buildings in cold darkness. People screamed and ran, others dropped to their knees. Children cried. Drones fell out of the sky. Even the automated turrets on the eastern wall powered down. The Wraith wasn't here to fight. She was here to see. Mara stood in the plaza, every instinct screaming at her to flee. But she couldn't move. She wasn't frozen by fear. It was something else, something deeper, like a string buried inside her was being pulled gently, firmly, guiding her toward the center. And then the beam came down. Not a weapon, not light, a corridor, a tunnel of translucent energy, humming softly, wrapped around her like a shimmering cage. Only her. No one else. When one of the watch soldiers tried to rush in, he hit the barrier and bounced off, dazed. She was being chosen. Reese's voice cut through her earpiece, sharp and panicked. Mara, do not go in. That's not an invitation, it's a trap. But she already knew that wasn't true. The Wraith didn't lure, she summoned. And Mara had been waiting her whole life. She stepped forward. The corridor lifted her off the ground, slow and steady. The people below looked up, shouting her name. Some begged her to come back. Others just watched, stunned. She didn't look back. The beam pulled her up and through the underbelly of the Wraith. The texture of the corridor shimmered around her, neither metal nor light. Not glass, not force field, just something new, something impossible. And then it opened. She floated into a massive chamber. Round. Endless. The walls pulsed with veins of soft, golden white light. It felt like she was inside a brain, or a heart, something alive, and she wasn't alone. A shape floated in the center. Vaguely human. Tall, draped in dark material that shimmered like starlight. No face, no visible features. Just presence. She couldn't tell if it was real or a projection, but it turned to her all the same. Then, without moving, it spoke, directly into her. You have changed. Mara couldn't speak, not out loud, but something inside her responded. You were watching. I never stopped. She felt emotions that weren't hers, anger, disappointment, and underneath it all, hope. Your kind forgot the warning, the Wraith continued. You began again, the choosing, the dividing, the hoarding. Mara took a breath. Some of us tried to change, some of us still are, That is why you were brought." The chamber dimmed slightly. A wall in front of her peeled away. Not physically, but like a memory unlocking. Images swirled inside. The riot from earlier, the militia preparing weapons, the rebel cells stockpiling explosives in the underground, and the Empire. Ships. So many ships. Heading back. "They return," the Wraith whispered. Mara clenched her fists. "Then stop them." "No." A pause. "You will." She stared. "Me? What you build will decide what I destroy." And then the corridor opened again, brighter now, pulsing with something urgent. She had been marked, a representative, a voice, or perhaps a test. Mara was lowered back to the ground in front of the stunned crowd. Her boots touched the stone, knees buckling. She looked up just as the Wraith began to rise again, quiet, slow, ever watching. The people stared at her like she was something else now. Because she was. The Wraith had chosen her. And war was coming. The world didn't go back to normal. Not after what happened in the plaza. Not after the Wraith chose Mara. She tried to walk home that night, tried to slip through the alleyways, pull her hood over her face, blend into the city she'd known her whole life. But it was impossible. People stopped talking when she passed. They stared, whispered, pointed. Some bowed their heads. Others simply backed away, afraid. It wasn't fame. It was fear. By morning, her name was on every colony transmission. Mara Venn, touched by the Wraith. Some called her a prophet. Some called her a weapon. A few even called her a traitor. And none of them were entirely wrong. Reese called an emergency council meeting. She didn't get a choice this time. He had a patrol escort her straight to City Hall. He stood at the head of the long ironwood table, his jaw tight, eyes sunken from lack of sleep. Around him, the rest of the council, scientists, ex-military officers, local elders, even a few former rebels, sat in stiff silence. Every eye turned to Mara as she entered. "You've been chosen," Reese said without ceremony. "So explain what that means." Mara took her seat and spoke slowly, deliberately. "She showed me everything, not just what's happening here, but out there, across the other colonies. The Wraith's been watching them all, tracking where war is likely, where hate is growing, where greed is spreading. She's waiting for a line to be crossed." "And you," one councilwoman interrupted, "are supposed to tell us what that line is?" "No," Mara replied. "I'm supposed to prevent us from crossing it." Laughter broke out, sharp and bitter. "You're 18, barked one of the military reps. "We've got entire districts on the brink of civil war, rebel splinters arming themselves in the mountains. And now intel says the Empire's fleet is inbound again, 6 days out. You think you can just hold all that back with words?" "No," Mara said flatly. "Not with words." She paused. "But maybe with truth." Reese raised an eyebrow. "Explain." "She didn't choose me because I'm special. She chose me because I'm angry. Because I've seen this place rot from the inside. I've felt how power is misused, how easy it is to turn on each other the moment we feel threatened. She knows we'll destroy ourselves before the Empire even sets foot here." One of the rebels leaned forward. "So what? You're her mouthpiece now." "I'm a mirror," Mara said. "She didn't come to punish us. She came to warn us." The room fell quiet again. And then Reese spoke, calm but cold. "The Empire will arrive in 6 days. They claim they're coming to re-establish order peacefully. But we know what that means. They'll put boots on the ground, then checkpoints, then curfews, then disappearances." Everyone nodded. No one disagreed. "She'll destroy them," someone muttered. Mara shook her head. "Not right away. The Wraith only intervenes after we fail. If we fight them without cause, if we spark war, shed blood, escalate, she won't protect us. She'll wipe us all out." That was the message. Rhys sighed. Then we've got a choice. Exactly, Mara said. We either prepare for war or prove we're worth saving. By doing what? Unifying, fast, open the rebel channels, reconnect the colonies, get the militia leaders to the table, disarm the agitators on both sides, start broadcasting truth, not fear, and when the Empire arrives... She looked around the room, letting her words land. We show them we're not broken. Another silence. Then Rhys nodded once. You've got 6 days, Mara. She stood. Then let's not waste them. And across the stars, in the deep black stretch of space, 6 Imperial ships entered pre-jump formation. In the lead vessel, High Commander Thaler stared at a recent scan of Artaxis. His face was stony, but his eyes were wary. She's still there? He asked. Vey looked up from her console. No sightings since the last descent, but locals say she's watching. Thaler narrowed his eyes. She always is. And with that, the fleet entered the void. They arrived at dawn. 6 Imperial warships broke through the upper atmosphere of Artaxis, their hulls gleaming like blades against the sun. Massive, methodical, unhurried. They didn't bring fire. Not yet. Their formation was tight, clean, deliberate, a show of force, not an act of war. Dropships detached one after another, descending toward the surface like silver raindrops. And the world held its breath. Mara stood at the base of the old Unity Square, where the city had once hosted parades back when the Empire was still worshipped like a god. The statue of the first governor had long since been torn down, replaced by a simple metal pole bearing a flag with no faction, just a single white circle over gray. The symbol of neutrality, of choice. She wore her Ridgewatch jacket, but beneath it, armor plates borrowed from rebel stocks. She carried no weapon. Behind her stood a wall of voices, council members, militia leaders, ex-rebels, medics, engineers, farmers. Not an army, a people, and above them the sky shimmered faintly. She was watching. The Wraith, hovering just beyond the clouds, still, silent, a god without a voice, until she needed one. The first Imperial dropship landed with a hiss of steam, its side hatch unfolding like a mouth. Soldiers filed out in rigid lines, visors down, rifles held across their chests but not raised. Then he emerged. High Commander Thaler, older, wearier, but no less dangerous. He stepped forward, hands behind his back, flanked by 2 armored lieutenants. His eyes locked on Mara immediately. No hesitation, no confusion. You, he said. I remember you. Mara didn't flinch. I remember you too. You ran. A flicker of something, anger, amusement, crossed his face. I made a tactical retreat, he said coldly. No, Mara said. You listened. That's why you're still alive. His mouth tightened, but he didn't argue. We're not here to fight, he said finally. Not unless we're forced. Then don't be, she replied. The wind shifted slightly. The faint shimmer in the sky darkened. People around her looked up, uneasy. Thaler noticed, too. He looked to the heavens, then back at her. You think she'll stop us again? Mara shook her head. Number, she's not here to stop anyone. Not anymore. Thaler frowned. Explain. She's here to witness. That's it. She gave us the choice. This time it's up to us. We fire first. She ends us all. You oppress, enslave, or incite. And she burns your fleet down to atoms. You force her hand, and no one walks away. Thaler's lieutenants shifted uncomfortably, but he stayed still. You expect us to just leave? I expect you to see, Mara said. We're not the same people you left behind. We're not Empire. We're not rebels. We're not trying to overthrow or serve. We're trying to live. And if you can't accept that... She looked up, eyes locking on that great ghost in the sky. Then she'll end the conversation for us. A silence fell, so complete even the breeze stopped. Then, from above, the clouds parted. A beam of light fell, not blinding, not loud, just final. It landed between them, neither warm nor cold, neither inviting nor hostile, it simply was. The crowd gasped. Thalor stared. Mara didn't move, and then she heard it, not in her ears, not in her mind, but in her bones. Judgment withheld, choice observed, outcome pending. Thalor took a step back, pale. She spoke to me. So now you believe, Mara said quietly. I always did, he admitted. I just hoped I wouldn't have to again. The light faded. The clouds closed. The wraith rose, slowly, disappearing into the sky. She was leaving them to their decisions. And this time, there would be no third warning. Thalor turned to his officers. Stand down. Full withdrawal. I won't be the one who triggers extinction. They nodded. And as the dropships retracted and the warships pulled away, Mara finally allowed herself to breathe. They'd survived. Not through power, but through restraint. Through change. She looked around at her people. No cheers, no applause, just quiet understanding. They hadn't won. They'd been spared. For now. But it was enough. Mara turned toward the sky, whispering just loud enough for the wind to carry, "We heard you!" And somewhere in the stars, the wraith waited. Watching. Always watching. They came without a warning. No rumbling skies, no glowing lights, no diplomatic nonsense. Just ships the size of cities darkening the clouds, blocking out the sun, dropping straight into our world like they owned it. They were called the Kriari, an ancient species, built like monsters and bred for one thing: conquest through carnage. By the time the first wave hit, half of Earth was already in flames. Cities fell in hours. Tokyo vanished in less than 10 minutes. They didn't come to enslave or negotiate. They came to feed. We weren't even worth words to them. They called us soft meat in their broadcasts. Primitive, overpopulated, emotionally unstable. Their ships hovered above the capitals, raining fire while the Kriari soldiers, massive creatures with plated skin, too many limbs, and eyes that pulsed with hunger, descended to the surface. They didn't wear armor. They didn't need to. Their biology made bullets bounce. They didn't use tactics. They just rushed and tore. And when we screamed, they laughed. Literally laughed. Their comms were filled with it. The first 2 days were hell. Governments fell quiet. Internet blackout. The sky was thick with smoke, and whatever was left of the militaries fought losing battles in broken streets. The Kriari didn't even see it as a war. It was dinner. But that's the thing about humans. We're not like other species. Sure, we cry, and we break, and we bleed too easy, but we don't stay down. Somewhere in the Appalachian Mountains, a group of survivors gathered. Ex-soldiers, farmers, hackers, kids, people who had no business standing against the galaxy's apex predators. But they did. They were led by a woman named Sergeant Lena Voss, dishonorably discharged for disobeying a direct order during the South China Rebellion. She didn't talk much. But her eyes? They burned. "Don't wait for the governments," she said. "They're gone. Don't pray for help. We are the help. The only thing we've got left is each other, and the rage in our bones." They called themselves the Ashborn because they came from the ashes. Their first weapon wasn't a gun or a missile. It was information. See, the Kriari weren't expecting resistance, and they definitely weren't expecting human hackers to crack their localized drone signals. Within days, Lena's team found out something crucial. The Kriari had weak points, not many, but enough. Behind their armored chests was a small organ, like a regulator. Shoot it, and the whole beast dropped. They also depended heavily on ultrasonic resonance for internal communication, which could be scrambled. That was when humans began fighting dirty, We stopped trying to match them in strength. We started using our brains, our unpredictability, our madness. Cities became traps. Underground tunnels turned into corridors of death. Humans lured Kriari into ambushes with bait, sometimes food, sometimes bodies. Explosives rigged with old-school tech, pressure plates, tripwires, boiling oil, things the Kriari scanners couldn't pick up. They weren't just fighting soldiers anymore. They were fighting a species with nothing to lose. Word spread. Resistance cells formed all over the planet. London sewers, African deserts, frozen wastes in Canada. Some scientists in Norway even rigged a way to hijack one of the Kriari drones and use it to pilot a stolen ship, kamikaze style, into a Kriari mothership above Moscow. They died, but they took the ship with them. It wasn't victory, not yet. But it was the first time the Kriari screamed. First time their broadcasts didn't mock us. They roared with confusion. Soft meat was fighting back, bleeding and burned, starving and half mad, but fighting back. And Lena? She didn't smile. Not once, even when her squad took down their first Kriari warbeast with just 5 people and a modified sewer pipe full of explosives. "We're not fighting for Earth," she said, kneeling in blood and ash. "We're fighting because no one tells humans what they're worth. Not anymore." The galaxy didn't know what kind of species we were, but they were about to find out. The Ashborn didn't sleep much. Sleep meant slowing down, and slowing down meant getting caught. The Kriari didn't hunt like animals. They hunted like nightmares. Silent, fast, and merciless. They'd sniff out heat, sound, even electromagnetic pulses. The moment you got comfortable, they were already behind you. So Lena Voss made sure her people stayed uncomfortable. They moved constantly, set traps, changed frequencies, lived in shadows. In the early days, they operated mostly at night, using the darkness as cover. But soon they learned Kriari could see heat signatures through most materials. That's when they adapted again, smearing themselves in cold mud, masking their heat with chemical paste, hiding in old meat lockers, sewers, morgues. The Ashborn weren't human anymore. Not really. They were feral. And it worked. In a bombed-out section of Philadelphia, they brought down an entire platoon of Kriari soldiers using reprogrammed subway trains filled with scrap explosives. They called it the Silver Guillotine. The Kriari had laughed, until steel shredded their armor and burned their insides. Lena watched from a rooftop as the wreckage smoked, her face painted in soot and blood, arms crossed. "We don't win by killing them," she told the others. "We win by making them fear us." And that fear, it started to spread. Back in orbit, aboard one of the Kriari command ships, General Hrothgar was furious. The humans were supposed to be livestock. Their biological data said they were emotionally unstable, disorganized, prone to infighting. They weren't warriors. And yet, here was Earth. Weeks into the invasion, and the Kriari had lost 3 minor fleet ships, 22 transports, and over 1,000 ground units, because humans were irrational, because humans didn't follow patterns, because humans refused to die quietly. Worse, Earth's biosphere was starting to infect them, literally. The bacteria in the air, harmless to humans, began to cause skin irritations and hallucinations in Kriari units. General Hrothgar ordered cleansing drones to burn infected zones with plasma, but it only scattered the resistance deeper underground. It was psychological now. The Kriari soldiers, bred to dominate, began showing signs of stress. Some refused to deploy without air filters. Others claimed they heard human voices even when alone. The humans began broadcasting messages over Kriari channels, twisted, whispery things in broken alien dialects. "You came for meat. Now choke on the bones. Every shadow has a knife. We were born in fire. You're just the fuel. The broadcasts weren't tactical. They were personal. They were meant to unnerve. And they did. By month 2, the Criari were no longer advancing. They were holding defensive positions, fortifications. They didn't say it out loud, but they were afraid of a species they had dismissed as food. That's when Lena knew the tide was turning. In a hidden bunker beneath what used to be Baltimore, Lena met with other cell leaders via hijacked drone signals. There were maybe a dozen faces on the screen. Dirty, scarred, exhausted, but alive and angry. "We've cracked their speech patterns," said Dr. Malik, a linguist from the old UN Council. "We can start jamming their orders, maybe even fake a few commands of our own." A grizzled woman from South Africa chimed in next. "We're training wolves to carry explosives. The Criari can't detect them. They don't register Earth animals as threats." Then came Saito, an ex-construction worker from Japan. "My crew found a way to melt through Criari armor using battery acid and magnetron waves. It ain't pretty, but it works." Lena nodded at each one, her eyes cold and unreadable. She didn't care where they came from. Doctors, killers, teachers, thieves. Earth had only one job now: survive by becoming something the universe never expected. United. Cruel. Relentless. Later that night, as the Ashbourne huddled in the dark, a boy named Nico, maybe 14, eyes too old for his face, asked Lena a question. "Do you think they'll leave?" Lena didn't answer right away. Instead, she knelt beside the fireless stove, checked her rifle, and said, "They won't leave, kid." Nico looked crushed. "So we're all gonna die?" She glanced up at him, a flicker of heat in her voice. "No," she said. "They are." And far above the smoke-choked Earth, the Criari began transmitting a new warning to their fleets across the stars. Earth is not soft meat. Earth is not prey. Earth is infected. Earth is hostile. By week 9, Earth had stopped being a battlefield. It had become a trap, one the Criari couldn't crawl out of. Their elite squadrons, once thought invincible, were now ghosts, burned, broken, or lost deep in the ruins of human cities. Those same cities, once symbols of civilization, were now war nests, twisted steel jungles with sniper holes, tripwire forests, and death blooming in every shadow. The Criari began calling the cities red zones, refusing to enter without full detachments. Even then, most didn't come back. In New York, what was left of it, the Ashbourne had turned Times Square into a slaughterhouse. Rigged billboards blared white noise that scrambled Criari comms. Sewer tunnels carried smoke and toxin clouds up through the storm drains. They used hacked speakers to replay battle sounds from days ago, confusing the enemy into firing at ghosts. And then there were the screams. Ashbourne operatives recorded actual Criari death howls and looped them across the ruins. Nothing was more unnerving than hearing your own kind dying on repeat, especially when you didn't know if it was real or a trick. Some Criari squads panicked. They shot each other. Fled. The predators were beginning to feel like prey. Inside an abandoned subway terminal beneath the Bronx, Lena Voss sat over a large map carved into steel. Pins marked every known Criari nest. Green meant cleared, red meant active, and black meant human blood. "We're not just pushing back anymore," she said to the others in the war room. "We're going hunting." Saito grinned like a wolf. "About time." They called the operation Black Lung. The plan was to breach a major Criari stronghold in Detroit, where one of the mothership landing claws had burrowed into the crust. It wasn't just a command post. It was a hive. They bred their spawn there, stored their meat, kept prisoners. And Lena wanted it burned to hell. But it wasn't about revenge, not really. It was about sending a message. The Ashbourne moved silently through miles of collapsed tunnel. They wore Kriari armor torn from the dead, filthy, cracked, and stitched with wire to fit human bodies. They called it second skin. Some even wore Kriari teeth as trophies, braided into their hair or hung around their necks. When they finally reached the hive perimeter, they found something unexpected. The Kriari weren't growing. They were dying. Whatever Earth's bacteria had started, it had mutated. Their hive was half-rotted, walls slimy with black mold. The air was thick with spores. Kriari corpses lined the tunnels, many of them discolored, their bones brittle and splitting from within. Dr. Malik, observing through drone cam, whispered into comms. "It's not just resistance. It's an ecosystem failure. Earth's biosphere is incompatible." Lena stared at the decay, her voice flat. "We're poison to them." They didn't hesitate. The Ashborn moved in, flamethrowers, acid bombs, concussion charges. They didn't just kill, they desecrated. They made sure every Kriari spawn pod was smashed, every communication node melted. They turned the hive into a funeral pyre, and when the screams came, they let them echo. Above Earth, General Hrothgar watched the feeds in silence. The footage from Detroit was being broadcast back to the Kriari High Conclave. Elders who had never seen war up close now stared at burning spawn sacks and mutilated soldiers. Earth wasn't worth the harvest anymore. It was a war zone too costly to win. A Kriari strategist finally spoke. "Request permission to initiate orbital purge." Hrothgar's jaw twitched. "Denied." "Why? These creatures defile us. Because if we burn their world," he growled, "they will follow the fire back to ours." There was a pause. Cold. Dreadful. He was right. Humans weren't interested in surviving anymore. They wanted retribution. And then, as if summoned by that very thought, a rogue human transmission broke into their fleet-wide comms. It was Lena Voss. Blood on her face, smoke in her hair. Behind her, the hive burned red. She spoke one sentence. "Predators don't get to choose their last meal." Then the feed cut. The Kriari, for the first time in their recorded history, began evacuating a planet. The first Kriari ship to retreat exploded before it left orbit. No one claimed responsibility. No one had to. All over Earth, resistance cells had been watching the skies. They'd mapped the enemy's takeoff sequences, their orbital paths, their exhaust frequencies. And when the Kriari tried to run, Earth answered with fire. It wasn't fancy tech. It wasn't space-age missiles or laser cannons. It was salvaged parts, hacked alien cores, and sheer human spite. Old Russian ICBMs retrofitted with reverse-engineered plasma heads. Some of them detonated before they even reached their targets. But the ones that landed? They sent messages. Across the globe, humans watched the sky light up, not in fear, but in pride. Not hope, rage, a different kind of fuel. Lena Voss stood on the roof of a shattered cathedral in what used to be Montreal, eyes locked on the flaming debris streaking across the clouds. "That's one," she said. Beside her, Nico held a battered radio. "There's another 2 confirmed break-offs over the Indian Ocean." Saito's voice crackled in on a separate line from Eastern Europe. "One of the carriers is leaking fuel. We clipped it. That bastard's not making it far." Lena didn't smile. She never did. But her voice turned colder, heavier. They thought they were feeding. They didn't know they were bleeding. Something strange was happening now. Something even the Ashborn hadn't planned. The Kriari were turning on each other. In the upper atmosphere, their fleet was divided between 2 commands. Those who wanted to cut losses and flee, and those who demanded vengeance, calling the withdrawal a coward's death. Kriari blood feuds were brutal, tribal, and sacred. Honor ran thicker than strategy, And when word of human retaliation reached the outer colonies, shame followed. Generals who had spoken of Earth as livestock were now being questioned, challenged. On Earth, we didn't know the full politics behind their cracks, but we saw the result. They stalled. Some ships hovered mid-evac, vulnerable and blind, caught between pride and fear. Others descended again, attempting to reassert control, but the fire waiting for them was hotter than before. Ashborn commanders around the globe launched counterstrikes. Drones painted with graffiti and war paint dove straight into hulls. Crude airships filled with explosives and magnetized shards sliced through open landing bays. In Cairo, a group of teenage engineers hacked into a downed Kriari scout and piloted it straight into a mothership's underbelly while blasting Beethoven's Ode to Joy. It wasn't just battle anymore. It was theater. A blood opera performed by a species that had nothing left to lose and every reason to destroy. And Lena? She was preparing for the final act. She stood in an old steel mill outside Chicago, now a forward base for a weapon she'd only whispered about until now, Operation Wormwood. At its core was a Kriari hypercore, scavenged from a disabled warcruiser, unstable and radioactive as hell. Human scientists told her it couldn't be used, said it would blow the planet before it helped save it. Lena just stared and said, "Then don't miss." They weren't going to use it on Earth. They were going to send it back. The Ashborn had found a way, barely. Using scavenged parts from Kriari comms relays and navigational AI, they began to configure a long-range transport built from a crashed landing craft. It was crude, ugly, barely held together, but it had coordinates to the Kriari homeworld. The plan was suicidal. Everyone knew it. Even if the bomb made it, the chances of surviving the launch were close to zero. But the Ashborn didn't flinch. Saito volunteered to fly it. No hesitation. "If I die," he said, "make sure they choke on my bones." Lena just nodded, then gave him her dog tags. "Make it count." That night, the sky lit up again, this time with something no Kriari had ever seen. A human-made weapon, stitched together with rage and rust, piercing the void like a spear hurled by the gods themselves. Aboard his makeshift craft, Saito looked down at the earth one last time, not as a soldier, not even as a man, but as a warning. And then he was gone. Somewhere in the void, between the stars that had watched the Kriari rise for eons, a human-made coffin hurtled through space, wrapped in vengeance and noise. Saito was strapped in tight, every inch of his body rattling against metal that was never meant to fly again. The ship stank of burned wires and old blood, half machine, half memory. Panels flickered. Warnings screamed in half-translated Kriari script. The hypercore throbbed behind him like a diseased heart, ticking down its unstable pulses. He grinned through the pain. They thought we were afraid of dying. He didn't know if anyone heard him. Maybe Lena, maybe no one. But he spoke anyway, for the record, for the ghosts. "I'm not here to live," he whispered. "I'm here to leave a scar." Back on Earth, the Ashborn monitored the signal. They tracked the vessel's warped path, watched it vanish into the dark at the edge of their hacked star maps. The moment it crossed the last beacon, the room went silent. Not a word. Just Lena standing there with her fists clenched, jaw tight. Dr. Malik finally broke the silence. "If it hits, we won't see it." "Good," Lena said. "Let them scream alone." But they did see it. Not with their eyes, not right away, but with the Kriari. The reaction was instant, electric. Across every fleet still hovering in Earth's orbit, their ships suddenly pulled back. Orders reversed. Trajectories changed. Whatever fractured alliance they'd held was broken now. They knew where Saito was headed. They were too late to stop it. And then, 10 days later, it happened. It wasn't a boom. It wasn't even fire. Not at first. It was absence. A sudden silence across the Criari galactic net. Their homeworld, coordinates once bristling with traffic, military reports, status updates, went dark. Total blackout. The Criari didn't tell anyone what had happened. They couldn't. Whatever that hypercore did to their world, it wasn't just destruction. It was shame. Cosmic, historical shame. Earth watched as entire squadrons of Criari ships dropped from orbit. No resistance, no fight. Some crashed into oceans, others just floated until they broke apart. Others self-terminated. They couldn't go home anymore, and they couldn't stay here. It was over. But humans weren't finished yet. In the weeks that followed, Earth's surface slowly began to open up. Ashborn cells gathered in the ruins to rebuild. But it wasn't a celebration. It was a reckoning. Billions were still dead. Oceans poisoned. Forests turned to ash. There were no governments left, only councils. No presidents or kings, just survivors. And Lena? She disappeared. One night she walked out into the hills above what used to be Cleveland. Nico saw her go. She didn't say a word, didn't leave a note. She just took a rifle, some rations, and vanished into the smoke. Some say she died out there. Others say she's still moving through the shadows, watching, waiting, preparing for whatever the galaxy throws next. Because in the end, Lena didn't fight for medals or revenge. She fought to remind the stars of one thing. Humanity was not prey. We were the infection, the fire, the species that should have died quietly, but instead taught the universe how loud rage can be. And the Criari, the deadliest predators in the known galaxy, they would spend the rest of their history whispering the name of the world that killed their pride. Earth. The skies were quiet now. For the first time in months, there were no roars of Criari engines, no plasma streaks through clouds, no death falling from above. Just wind. Cold, cracked wind blowing through the ruins of what used to be cities. Nature was trying to remember itself. Trees burned black but still rooted. Rivers choked with ash but flowing again. Earth, like its people, refused to die. But peace? This wasn't peace. This was after. The war had ended without a treaty, without surrender. The Criari vanished into the stars, broken and humiliated, their homeworld silent, possibly dead. But Earth hadn't won. Not really. It had survived. And that survival came with a price no one had counted. Entire continents were ghost zones. Communication was patchy, and food supplies were a constant fight. The ash in the air still poisoned lungs. Bodies remained buried under rubble in places too dangerous to reach. And worse, humans had changed. Permanently. The Ashborn, now scattered across the planet, were more than fighters. They were symbols. Some saw them as saviors. Others feared them. What did it mean to follow people who had taught the world how to kill monsters using bone knives and dirty bombs? In New Santiago, a makeshift settlement rising in the Andes, a council gathered under a cracked dome, salvaged from an old observatory. Men and women from every surviving region sat at a stone table, most wearing mismatched armor, faces hard and sunburned. "We need order," one said. "We need structure, agriculture, power grids." "We need to bury the dead," another snapped. "You want to talk about grids? People are turning feral out there, bandits with acid rifles and Criari teeth on chains. No government survived. That means we make one, or we'll rot in the mud we bled for." That's when a figure stepped into the chamber. The room fell silent. Nico. He wasn't a boy anymore. Months in the fire had aged him, face lean, jaw set, eyes like chipped glass. He walked with a limp now, carrying Lena's old rifle slung across his back. She didn't want this, he said. They turned to him. Who? Lena, the Ashborn. We didn't fight so we could go back to kings and flags and lines on maps. We fought because no one else would. We survived because we had to. Not to crown ourselves. Not to rule. A silence hung there, thick and unsettled. Then someone spoke, a former naval officer. And what do you propose? Chaos? Nico stared him down. I propose that before we start trying to rebuild the world, we figure out what we want it to be. Because the last version of Earth, the one they invaded, that world invited monsters. Outside the dome, people gathered. Survivors, fighters, children born in bunkers, engineers patching together wind turbines, doctors using salt water to clean wounds. No armies, no borders, just broken people refusing to lie down. The Ashborn weren't leaders. They were reminders of how far humanity could fall and still keep crawling forward. And yet, not everything stayed quiet. In the farthest reaches of the solar system, a deep space telescope flickered back to life, patched by scavenger crews rebuilding it for scientific use. One of the techs saw it first. A strange anomaly, not a fleet, not a star, a signal, faint, encrypted, not cryery. It pulsed like a heartbeat, steady, intentional. From somewhere deep beyond the Orion Drift, a message came. We saw your war. We saw your fire. We didn't think you would win. We were wrong. We are coming. The techs didn't sleep that night. They brought it to the council in New Santiago, and Nico stood alone at the edge of the transmission feed, watching those words repeat over and over like an omen. Is it them? Someone asked. He shook his head slowly. Number, this isn't the Criari. This feels colder. They were not alone, and Earth had just announced itself as a threat. The galaxy had been watching, and now the rest were on their way. The signal didn't stop. Every 6 hours, the same sequence pulsed across frequencies only deep-range scanners could catch. No image, no voice, just those words over and over. We are coming. Earth's surface hadn't even finished burying its dead, but now eyes turned skyward again. Not in terror, not yet, but in grim readiness. Humanity had just learned how to crawl through hell. They weren't about to be caught off guard again. In the underground facility once known as Vault Theta, buried deep beneath the Scottish Highlands, the Ashborn began preparing for the second storm. They didn't rebuild cities. They built bunkers, training camps, weapons labs. Earth wasn't trying to become a civilization again. It was becoming a fortress. Nico spent his days walking the old relay corridors of Vault Theta, reading the data, scanning the frequencies. He was restless, haunted. Not by what had happened, but by what hadn't, by the silence between the signals. He'd learned from Lena that threats don't always come with roars. Sometimes they come politely, quietly, predictably, and that's what scared him the most. We need eyes past the belt, he told the new Earth Council. If something's out there, we don't wait for it to knock. He wasn't a soldier anymore. He was something harder to define. A survivor. A symbol. And symbols, as the Criari had learned, had power. The Council, fractured and struggling, didn't argue. They gave Nico access to what remained of Earth's orbital defense network. With old satellites patched using Criari tech, he launched Project Sentinel, a net of observation drones, scanning the void for movement. They were crude, dirty, and beautiful. Human. Days passed, then weeks. The signal changed, not in message, but in tone. It began adding layers, hidden frequencies, mathematical pulses. Dr. Malik, now one of Earth's lead xenocryptologists, unraveled it slowly, painfully. And what he found wasn't a threat. It was a challenge, not "we are coming" in a hostile tone. But we saw what you did, and now we want to see if it was a fluke. They're testing us, Malik said to the War Council. Someone out there watched the Kriari fall, and instead of fearing us, they got curious. Nico leaned over the console, eyes narrowing. What kind of species watches another get gutted and thinks, let's see what made that happen? Malik didn't answer, because deep down, everyone knew the truth. Something worse than the Kriari was out there. Something smarter. Something older. And now that Earth had roared loud enough to shake the stars, it had drawn attention. So Earth did what Earth had always done. It adapted. Ashborn recruiters traveled the ruins, searching for anyone with skills, knowledge, or the will to fight again. Former scavengers were given rifles. Scientists were pulled from bunkers and thrown into labs with whatever scraps could be salvaged. And children, those born during the occupation, were taught the truth early. You are not safe. The universe doesn't care if you've suffered. No one is coming to save you. You fight, or you die. In old Brazil, a scavenger tribe constructed a sky harpoon from shipwrecked alien alloys, capable of anchoring enemy vessels during descent. In Morocco, engineers built signal jammers out of fused Kriari language cores, able to scramble even deep space navigation systems. In the Arctic, remnants of the Russian Federation activated something darker, an experimental AI buried long ago under layers of frost and concrete. It was called Volchok, the wolf. Cold, ruthless, unbound by ethics. It had been designed for global suppression, never deployed during the old wars. But now? Now they gave it a new mission. Protect Earth, at all costs. And in the quiet spaces between stars, something was coming. Not fleets, not yet, but scouts. Nico stood in Vault Theta's observatory chamber, watching a small red dot appear on the edge of the system. No ID, no propulsion matching Kriari tech, no broadcast, just movement, deliberate, slow. He whispered to himself, let them come. Because Earth wasn't rebuilding peace, it was preparing a welcome. It appeared in Earth's skies on a quiet morning. No explosions, no invasion alarms, no shadow creeping across continents. Just a single vessel, sleek, bone-white, and shaped like a blade, hovering above the Pacific, perfectly still, as if it had been there the whole time. No insignia, no markings, no demands. It didn't move, didn't speak. It just watched. From Vault Theta, Nico stared at the live feed. Dozens of telescopes and drone cameras tracked every inch of the craft, but it refused to yield anything. No heat signatures, no emissions. It defied physics like it didn't belong in this universe. And maybe it didn't. Dr. Malik muttered under his breath. This thing didn't travel here. It arrived, like thought, like memory. The council was divided. Some argued to contact it. Others wanted it shot down immediately. But Earth had learned its lesson. Never assume the enemy is here to talk. And that's when it happened. A signal. Not on radio. Not infrared. Not even through the known electromagnetic spectrum. It spoke through thought. Hundreds of humans, soldiers, farmers, scavengers, children, fell unconscious at once. Not in pain, but as if pulled into a dream, a shared vision. And when they woke, they remembered everything. A voice, clear, cold, curious. You are not prey, you are not predator, you are mutation, you are error. An anomaly that defies expectation. We watched you kill the Kriari. Now we ask, what else can you kill? It wasn't a threat. It wasn't even fear. It was fascination. The species behind the blade ship didn't want Earth's resources. They didn't want slaves. They wanted data. They saw humanity not as vermin or rivals, but as something far worse. A variable they couldn't predict. And in a galaxy built on cold equations and conquest, Unpredictability was dangerous. The next part of the signal was even clearer. We offer a proposition. Face us in trial, a test of your existence. Win and remain. Fail and be forgotten. Nico heard it in his mind, like it had been etched there since birth. He turned to the council, jaw locked. They want a war. Malik nodded slowly. Not a war of territory, of worth. They're measuring us like a lab rat solving a maze. Only the maze is survival. The vote was brief. Humanity didn't bow. Not now, not ever. A new force was assembled. Not soldiers, not diplomats. But the most unstable, most adaptive, most dangerous minds Earth had left. They called them the Second Ashborn. Veterans of the Kriari War. Children born in fire. Hackers who weaponized thought. Scavengers who built bombs from alien waste. And leading them was Nico. Older now, scarred and silent, carrying not just Lena's rifle, but her cause. He didn't fight for Earth's past. He fought for its future, the twisted, terrifying shape it had to take to survive a universe that wanted it gone. The trial began in orbit. A platform the size of a city, black as the void, materialized near the moon. Gravity bent wrong around it. Lights bled in colors the human eye couldn't describe. The Ashborn stepped onto it, eyes forward. And the test? It wasn't fair. They faced beasts crafted from theoretical biology, weapons coded in time loops, puzzles built on collapsing logic. One chamber flooded their senses with memories of the war, the screams, the burning, the hopelessness, trying to drown them in despair. But they didn't break. Because Earth didn't raise heroes. It raised monsters with purpose. Nico, limping, bleeding, half-mad with pain, stood before the final judge, a being of pure mind, floating in a shell of glass and light. It asked him one final question. Why do you persist? And Nico, voice shaking but steady, answered, because someone has to show the stars what happens when you try to erase the wrong species. He pulled the trigger. The chamber shattered, and Earth's trial was over. They passed. The blade ship vanished days later. No reward, no allies, just silence. But humanity didn't care. They returned home, changed, hardened, wiser, not just survivors anymore, not even just soldiers, but a cosmic warning. Because the galaxy now understood one thing, burn into every species' memory, carved into the bones of fallen empires. Earth is not prey. Earth is not safe. Earth is the reason monsters check behind their backs.